will he be, or will he be the comeback kid? You know, that's what they like to talk about. That's what they like to talk about. I understand. Yeah, one of the things you realize is basically that a lot of reporting in Washington, it's just like SportsCenter. You know, it's considered a sport. And who's up and who's down, and everybody's keeping score, and you got the teams going at it. It's rock'em sock'em robots, you know. Look, let me say this, George Mason. I don't know how this plays politically. Nobody really does. I mean, there's been so much misinformation and so much confusion, and you know, the climate at times during the course of this year has been so toxic, and people are so anxious because the economy has been going through such a tough time. I don't know what's going to happen with the politics on this thing. I don't know whether my poll numbers go down, they go up. I don't know what happens in terms of Democrats versus Republicans. But here's what I do know. I do know that this bill, this legislation, is going to be enormously important for America's future. I do know the impact it will have on the millions of Americans who need our help, and the millions more who may not need help right now, but a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, if they have some bad luck, if heaven forbid they get sick, if they've got a pre-existing condition, if their child has a pre-existing condition, if they lose their job, if they want to start a company, I know the impact it'll have on them. I know what this reform will mean for people like Leslie Banks, a single mom I met in Pennsylvania. She's trying to put her daughter through college, just like probably some of your moms and dads are trying to put you through college. And her insurance company just sent her a letter saying they plan to double her premium this year, have it go up 100%. And she can't afford it. So now she's trying to figure out, am I going to keep my insurance, or am I going to keep my daughter in college? Leslie Banks needs us to pass this reform bill. I know what reform will mean for people like Laura Klitschko. I met Laura up in Green Bay, Wisconsin while I was campaigning. She thought she had beaten her breast cancer. Then she discovered it had spread to her bones. And she and her husband, they were lucky enough to have insurance, but their medical bills still landed them in debt. So now she's spending time worrying about the debt when all she wants to do is think about how she can spend time with her two kids. Laura needs us to pass this reform bill. I know what reform will mean for people like Natoma Canfield. When her insurance company raised her rates, she had to give up her coverage, even though she'd been paying thousands of dollars in premiums for years because she had beaten cancer 11 years earlier. They kept on jacking up her rates. Finally, she thought she was going to lose her home. She was scared that a sudden illness would lead to financial ruin, but she had no choice. Right now, she's lying in a hospital bed, faced with paying for such an illness after she had to give up her health insurance. She's praying that somehow she can afford to get well. She knows that it is time for reform. So George Mason, when you hear people saying, well, why don't we do this more incrementally? Why don't we do this a little more piecemeal? Why don't we just help the folks that are easiest to help? My answer is the time for reform is now. We have waited long enough. We have waited long enough. And in just a few days, a century-long struggle will culminate in a historic vote. We've had historic votes before. We had a historic vote to put Social Security in place to make sure that our elderly did not live out their golden years in poverty. We had a historic vote in civil rights to make sure that everybody was equal under the law. As messy as this process is, as frustrating as this process is, as ugly as this process can be, when we have faced such decisions in our past, this nation, time and time again, has chosen to extend its promise to more of its people. You know, the naysayers said that Social Security would lead to socialism. But the men and women of Congress stood fast and created that program that lifted millions out of poverty. There were cynics that warned that Medicare would lead to a government takeover of our entire health care system, and that it didn't have much support in the polls, but Democrats and Republicans refused to back down, and they made sure that our seniors had the health care that they need and could have some basic peace of mind. So previous generations, those who came before us, made the decision that our seniors and our poor, through Medicaid, should not be forced to go without health care just because they couldn't afford it. Today it falls to this generation to decide whether we will make that same promise to hard-working middle-class families and small businesses all across America and to young Americans like yourselves who are just starting out. So here's my bottom line. I know this has been a difficult journey. I know this will be a tough vote. I know that everybody's counting votes right now in Washington. But I also remember a quote I saw on a plaque in the White House the other day. It's hanging in the same room when I demanded answers from insurance executives and just received a bunch of excuses. And it was a quote from Teddy Roosevelt, the person who first called for health care reform, that Republican, all those years ago, and it said, "Aggressively fighting for the right is the noblest sport the world affords." I don't know how passing health care will play politically, but I know it's right. Teddy Roosevelt knew it was right. Harry Truman knew it was right. Ted Kennedy knew it was right. And if you believe that it's right, then you've got to help us finish this fight. You've got to stand with me just like you did 3 years ago and make some phone calls and knock on some doors, talk to your parents, talk to your friends. Do not quit. Do not give up. We keep on going. We are going to get this done. We are going to make history. We are going to fix health care in America with your help. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.